Well, this week's Discover Thursday featured member, Whatcom Land Title Company, the only locally owned title company in Whatcom County currently operating and with locations throughout the county. John Bacon joins us now. John, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Sasha, for having me.
You
It's
bet.
great to be here.
You bet. So I close on a house, or I get the terms done, I get the deals done. Close was the wrong word, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and that's where Whatcom Land Title Company comes in. So let's just take it back to 101, John.
Okay.
The process of buying a house. You've come to terms. Now what happens?
Yeah, so we'll get a copy of the purchase and sale agreement turned into us if the buyer chooses us to be their insurance company. Interesting side note is the buyer's choice, because they're the ones that are going to be getting the policy.
Right.
So the buyer's policy, buyer's choice. But we get the purchase and sale agreement, and then it kind of splits into two different chains. So we've got the escrow side, and so they'll open up. They're the ones that facilitate the close of the transaction, and they collect the money and clear the title for the new buyer. And then, so they'll start their file and start working that file up. They'll be communicating with the real estate agents on both sides, the buyer and the seller, to get documents and money or whatever they need to, payoffs for existing mortgages. And then once they get all that stuff situated and all the terms of the contract have been met, then they'll set an appointment for the buyer and seller to come in, and the buyer will sign the loan documents if there's a loan. The seller will sign the deed, and then on the day of the closing, the money will be transferred and the deed will be recorded, and that's how the buyer gets the title. And at that point, they're the owner of the property. Now, the second chain that happens after you turn in the purchase and sale agreement is on the title side. So a title officer will pick up their title file that's created from that purchase and sale agreement, and they'll see the address on there, and they'll go to the county website, look it up, see who the county shows as the owner, and then they'll go to the public records, the assessor's, auditor's records, and they'll start looking through the auditor's records for any information that deals with that property. So it could be, old deeds. We'll pull up all the old deeds that existed on that property since the time it was first given to an individual from the government, sometimes prior to statehood, all the way to the present day. And then we'll also get any easements that might exist on the property that are recorded, agreements. We'll also search the public Superior Court records for any judgments or liens that might pop up against an owner or the buyer. And that information will be put on the title commitment, which is kind of a preview of the title policy. And it's also, the name implies, it's a commitment to issue the policy after the sale is successful.
It's quite a process.
It's a big process, yeah. So that gets issued, the title commitment gets issued, those copies go out, they review the title commitments. If the buyer still wants to buy, with all that stuff showing on the title commitment, they feel comfortable, then they go through with it. And at the end of that sale, when the deed is recorded, then we issue the title insurance policy for the new buyer.
And the reason for what seems like a pretty complicated process, it's protection, right? It's protection for the buyer.
Yeah.
All parties involved, really.
It really is. The primary protection, I would say, would be for the buyer. The buyer is coming into a purchase where they're spending a lot of money on, an investment in their future, their family's future. And what if they spent that amount of money and then it turns out the person they bought it from doesn't own the property, or they bought a vacant piece of land and they're going to build their house here, but what the seller didn't tell them is that there's a water main easement that goes right under their building site, and that's the only place to build. So these are things that the title policy can protect against. And so it's different from a homeowner's insurance policy. It doesn't protect, leaky roofs or flooding or that sort of thing. It protects the title to the property, and the title is all those legal rights that exist on a particular piece of land.
So in essence, if we wanted to simplify it, you're like private investigators. You
Yes.
dig through and you find stuff and you bring stuff to the surface.
We often say in this office that it's time to go sleuthing, or we're going to sleuth around, or good job, finding
Right.
that. We really are investigating the public records and historical records for things that might affect a piece of property.
I know there's a lot of privacy involved, so I understand if you can't
Yes.
get into detail, and those are protections too, obviously. Is there, I imagine you come across some weird stuff or some different stuff from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I think it's in this old part of Bellingham called the town of New Whatcom. And I picked Bellingham just because there's so much going on in Bellingham that it's easy to come up with one of these examples. But it on the map, the original map where they created the town of New Whatcom, there is a reservation written on the map that says this particular area of the map, and it describes it. There's a reservation there for an old wagon road.
Okay.
And so, technically, when we're examining the property, we'll look at these maps and we'll look for things like that, the little reservations. And now, there is a reservation. Does that affect my property that I'm examining? And if it does, then I would put that reservation for the old wagon road on the title commitment. Well, that's a really unusual thing.
Sure.
And when I first came across that, I put it on my first title commitment. And the customer came back and said, hey, does this really need to be on here? It's an old wagon road. And we took it to our underwriters, who are the attorneys for the policy that we're issuing. And they said, you can remove it. Even though it's still of public record and it's still a reservation, we're willing to remove it as an exclusion from coverage.
Common sense exclusion, it sounds like. Yeah.
Because we're probably not going to have a claim on it. It's very safe to say nobody's going to be driving a wagon down that road, So that was an unusual one.
Yeah, that's fun though. Again, part of the PI work.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll get ones where that aren't as silly, but it's unusual, where a piece of property turns out it doesn't have legal access, and somebody's trying to buy it, and on occasion there's even like a structure on the property, and you've discovered there's no legal access.
Right.
And typically in those situations, you can imagine somebody that owns maybe like a 10-acre farm, let's say, hypothetically, and the house sits in the back, and maybe the children inherited it, and now they're no longer farming it. And so they decide to sell the front 5 acres. They'll make some money that'll allow them to pay the mortgage on the house or do improvements or whatever. And but they forget that they have to drive across that front 5 to get to the back 5. And so once that front 5 is sold, they've just essentially landlocked their backside of the property. That happens from time to time.
Yeah.
People do it on their own without consulting with attorneys. Yeah.
We're talking with John Bacon, Whatcom Land Title Company, our Discover Thursday feature member of the week. When a buyer, seller hires a realtor, they trust, there's a lot of trust there too. And one of the things they're trusting in is that realtor, or maybe even their lender, is going to have a good relationship with a title company and a title insurance company. That's so important. You mentioned earlier that really ultimately it's the buyer's choice, but a lot of times they're steered by their lender or their real estate agent to Whatcom Land Title.
Yeah, that's true. Lenders and real estate agents, they will tend to form a friendship and kind of a bond with somebody at a title company. And so I had some people like that they just liked me and the service I provided. And so even though I was in customer service and I didn't have any direct like hand in the closing process or the examination process,
Mm-hmm.
like they would use us because they liked me and the service that I provided to them. And I find that most times a real estate agent will start using an escrow officer that they really like. And that person will follow that escrow officer wherever they go, if they go to a different company. And so there's a lot of loyalty to the escrow closer. And same with lenders. Lenders will have a strong association with the closer. And it's typically because
They work with you on a daily basis.
Yeah, they work with you on a daily basis. Maybe it's their form of communication. They're receptive to different forms of communication. So different real estate agents, different lenders have different ideas of how they want to be communicated with. Some people want to not have any communication unless it's absolutely necessary. And other people want to know every little step so that they can convey that information to their client, and which kind of looks good for them because their client is feeling like things are happening and their real estate agent is, on top of things. So it depends on the style of the lender and the real estate agent.
And the buyer too, I would imagine, because I, as a buyer myself, I'm going to say, I don't need to be bogged down with details. Tell me where to sign on the dotted line, and that's what I'm going to do, and let's move on. But I imagine there's a lot of buyers that say, I need to know X, X, and X.
Yeah, there are. There's a wide variety of buyers. You've got first-time home buyers who know nothing. And so there's a lot of education there that we can provide, the real estate agent can provide, the lender provides. They get a bunch of information from all different sources. Then you've got you may have somebody who's owned 10 houses in their lifetime and they still don't know what title insurance policy is or what it does, because as far as they're concerned, this is just another step in the process of owning the house, and that's their focus.
That's me. Ultimately, it would the insurance was a line item on what I paid every month.
Right, and so and then you just sign. When it comes to signing, you're just trusting that person is the documents they're putting in front of you is real, And
my wife's always told me I'm way too trusting with that stuff, but that's why you guys are here.
Yeah, because we can explain it to them. To people.
Obviously, the single most important thing, you mentioned the word communication a lot, which I really like, but obviously when it get right down to the brass tacks, the single most important thing is making sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. But I would say the second most important thing, at least in most people's eyes, is how fast the process goes. How fast are we going to get to close on this house? Is that correct?
That can be. If there's a lot of speculation going on in the market, there's a lot of people that want fast closing. Some people are buying a business or something like that, and they have a certain timeline that they need to adhere to. They're buying a piece of property to build a commercial structure on, and so they need to get acceptance by a certain time, but they realize after that it could be months and months before the actual closing happens, So it really varies a lot on people's situation. Residentially speaking, for residential purchases, if you have somebody that's moving from another state, and their job is happening and they've got their other house sold and they're coming in, they need that. The faster the better, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody lives in the neighborhood and they're just buying another house to upgrade, maybe they have more time. So it is a factor though to be able to close quickly if need be, and I think that's the important distinction is to be able to do that. And one thing that Whatcom Land Title has is we have a ton of experienced closers. If you add up all the years of experience that our closers and our title officers have, you'd be talking about over 100 years each. So there's a lot of experience there, and we have a lot of title officers that have been working in this county for their whole career, and they know the ins and outs of the different neighborhoods and the little tricks and traps that title gives them for certain areas of the county. They can anticipate that, or they've dealt with that in the past, so they don't have to keep asking the underwriter what they need to do.
Real estate market has, just like everything else, been really interesting over the last 3 to 4 years. And if you're, not to rehash everything, but in the last 3 years, we've seen record high inflation. We've seen housing prices that we've never seen before. The Fed has raised the interest rate here this last year, 3 or 4 times already?
Yeah.
These all have impacts on Whatcom Land Title, your business and what you do. How have the last 3 years compared to your previous experience in the business?
It's been really interesting. This real estate is really cyclical typically. So you'll have the real estate market will start to get hot in the spring, and then it really heats up in the summer because it's beautiful outside. People's yards look really good in the summer, and people are outside and they want to go outside and look and shop and things. So it's really the real estate market's hot in the summer, and then it kind of builds up in the spring and falls off in the fall. But in the last, since COVID, actually, it's been pretty busy. It's been pretty busy since 2019, 2020, 21, 22. And when one of my jobs as a marketer is to take agents out and get to know them and kind of do just kind of relationship marketing for them. And I would ask them how their business is going. And during the ones that would go out with me during COVID, wear a mask and we'd go to a restaurant that was still open, and we would sit, 5 feet apart and have lunch. But I would ask them how their business is going, and most of the time, they were saying this has been a really banner year for them. And this is 2019, 2020. And at first I'm like, why is that? COVID, everybody's on lockdown. Why should the housing market be super, hot right now? Even in the January and February, it's super hot. And the agents would tell me that it's a lot of cash buyers coming in from Seattle, Portland, California, because now they can work remotely. Mm-hmm. And so why are they living in California in these kind of city environments where they're paying
urban
a lot
jungles
of money for housing when they can come to Bellingham and get the mountains and the sound and all that Bellingham has to offer, and Whatcom County, not just Bellingham, but Birch Bay is beautiful, Simiamu, all that stuff. And they can live on a fraction of what they pay there, and they cash out down there and they move up here and they work remotely. And so a lot of people were doing that. Realtors
and sellers, they like them cash buyers too, don't they?
Yeah.
1982 is when Whatcom Land Title opened up. By my math, that's 41 years in Whatcom County. And we mentioned at the outset being the only locally owned title company currently operating in Whatcom County.
That's right.
What does that bring to the table?
Well, that brings to the table a company that has invested in this community in Whatcom County, and they employ a lot of people, and those people live here, and they use the services, and the money that you spend at Whatcom Land Title for your title and escrow or whatever other services you're getting here stays in this community. All of it has a potential to stay in this community. If your corporation is located in another state, then some of that money goes to that corporation. Right. So our owners are in an office a couple doors from here where we're having this interview. And it's fantastic to be able to go over there and talk to the owners and say, hey, I think this would be a good thing to do for this company, and they can do it. So we can we don't have to call Houston or call New York to make a decision.
Walk
We
down
just
the hall.
walk down the hall and ask the owner. And I love that.
Yeah, that's certainly nice, and it's good that the money stays local too. That's super important.
It supports all the other small businesses in the area. You know, we're a small business, and and we like to support local businesses, and that's been a big like not only selling point but kind of a mantra for us at Whatcom Land Title, is to support local and go local when we can. So that's what we do.
We're physically in the Bellingham location now, but you do have 3 other locations, including one you opened up, it looks like almost exactly 4 years or 5 years ago in Birch Bay.
Yeah, 2018, March of 2018 in Birch Bay. And we opened that with the idea that we wanted to better service that community. It's a growing area, and we wanted to be part of that growth and help people out in that area. Just be a little closer to where our customers are, you know.
Convenience, for sure.
Convenience, yeah. And so we get people that's, you know, live in Birch Bay, signed there. We get people that are moving to Birch Bay, they sign from there. We get people from Canada that come down and sign there, you know, and so it's a great location. And we've got one of our escrow officer that works there, Laura Lee. She grew up in the Ferndale area.
Okay.
So she's kind of in that zone, you know, and she lives up in Blaine. And so it's like she's knows the area really well, you know, and she's got a lot of connections with people in that area.
And that's important for sure. And speaking of Ferndale, locations in Ferndale and Linden as well.
Yeah, exactly. Ferndale and Linden. Our Linden location, they're kind of, they're not excluded from the rest of the county, but they're kind of in a bubble up there by themselves, you know?
Yeah.
So it's good to have an office up there where people can just go and they don't have to come all the way down, even to Birch Bay or like all the way down to Bellingham.
People are busy, and time is money, and when you have to travel away, sometimes that can be an inconvenience.
It really is, yeah. And so having those multiple locations is really like help us reach those communities better.
Whatcom Land Title Company, these are our Discover Thursday featured member, John Bacon. We've been visiting with you. Thanks so much for talking with us, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.